work. Ooh. Well, I would love for someone, if you've got another device there with you, to report whether or not live video is streaming right now.
Streaming from what? Substack?
From the Substack.
You just called Substack Zoom.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I meant Substack. You could read my mind though.
Let me log on to Substack if I can get there, and I'll. It says watch the replay. That's crazy. That's not what we want. We want to go to. Yeah. I see only replay there. So, what is the link? Oh, I see something moving now. 7/11/26 live at Stage Lead.
That's right. Well, actually, it should say Storytime. It should say Storytime.
All right. I'm gonna mute on Zoom so it doesn't do weird thing.
Okay.
Seems to be working.
Oh.
The weird thing is above it you've got like another video and that's just frozen. So there's two videos, and I don't know if Jesus. Man, those glasses are crazy.
Okay, I'm now seeing it on my front page, so I'm gonna. I was hoping that I could look at the. I was hoping that I could look at the chat from Substack as well, but Ed, if you've got Substack up.
Well, there's two. I don't want to hide. I don't know why there's two. I start the other one. That one's moving too. So basically, you've just done two links, or two, whatever they call them, in Substack land.
All right. I think you're the only one that's on Substack right now. I'm going to go ahead and get started, and I'm going to hide my face on. I'm going to hide my face on this OBS and also Substack because it's not. You know that thing where you can mirror your face, and it looks like you're looking in a mirror? It's really unsettling when you have it the other way and you are expecting it to be like a mirror. But let's go ahead and start. It's 5 o'clock. Welcome to Storytime for Saturday, July 11th, 2026. And I'm going to read some poems about summer, and then I'm going to read this really weird story about Venus and settlers on Venus. I mean, we kind of now know in 2026 that, it's kind of impossible to have settlers on Venus, but back when Ray Bradbury wrote that story, he didn't know that. So his story is called All Summer in a Day, and it's really lovely. I'll say more about it right before I read it. But I've got a bunch of older poems. The first one is from William Blake, who lived from 1757 to 1827. And so the poems will get more and more modern. They won't be quite so arch. And the thing that characterized most poetry from Blake's era, and he was kind of a romantic poet, it was the fact that you twisted your poetic line around to meet the meter of what you were trying to do in the line. And that's no longer quite so necessary in poetry, but it was very necessary then. And I want you to notice that, how summer is personified here, like it's seen as a chariot driving through the sky with the hot breath of the horses coming down as the summer wind. And then toward the end of the poem, and it's not very long, I'm not going to subject you to, minutes and minutes of William Blake, but I want you to notice that in near the end of it, it sort of goes through all these things that we can do to allay the summer heat or deal with the summer heat. So here's To Summer by William Blake. O thou who passest through our valleys in thy strength, curb thy fierce steeds, allay the heat that flames from their large nostrils, thou, O summer. Oft pitched here thy golden tent, and oft beneath our oaks has slept, while we beheld with joy thy ruddy limbs and flourishing hair. Beneath our thickest shades we oft have heard thy voice, when noon upon his fervid car rode o'er the deep of heaven. Beside our springs sit down, and in our mossy valleys on some bank beside a river clear, throw thy silk draperies off and rush into the stream. Our valleys love the summer in his pride. Our bards are famed who strike the silver wire. Our youth are bolder than the southern swains, our maidens fairer in the sprightly dance. We lack not songs, nor instruments of joy, nor echoes sweet, nor waters clear as heaven, nor laurel wreaths against the sultry heat. And I love this. Our bards are famed who strike the silver wire. In other words, who play the guitar or the lyre, So now we're going to move up an entire century, and maybe even more, to a poem called Summer Night by Sarah Teasdale, which is from the Love Poems of Sarah Teasdale. I'm not sure the exact date that this was published. But this poem contrasts a kind of an experience that happened at a certain time of year, and then shows how that time of year comes around and they're in a different place. So Summer Night, Riverside by Sarah Teasdale. In the wild, soft summer darkness, how many and many a night we two together sat in the park and watched the Hudson wearing her lights like golden spangles glinting on black satin. The rail along the curving pathway was low in a happy place to let us cross. And down the hill a tree that dripped with bloom sheltered us, while your kisses and the flowers falling, tangled in my hair. The frail white stars moved slowly over the sky. And now, far off in the fragrant darkness, the tree is tremulous again with bloom, for June comes back. Tonight, what girl dreamily before her mirror shakes from her hair this year's blossoms, clinging to its coils? So here's a poem by Mark Twain, a man not really always of few words, but this poem is a poem of few words. And what I love about this poem is its shortness, probably written in the 19th century, probably late in the 19th century. And I love about it the bell-like rhythm of summer. And you'll hear the repeated, sort of syllables and phrases, and it's not just rhymes at the end, but things internal to the line as well. Warm Summer Sun by Mark Twain, after Robert Richardson. Warm summer sun, shine kindly here. Warm southern wind, blow softly here. Green sod above, lie light, lie light. Good night, dear heart. Good night, good night. Mark Twain, Warm Summer Sun. So here's a bit more complicated of a poem, published, about 4 months after I was born. Oh no, for about 6 months before I was born, because I was born in December of 1957, and this poem was published in the Poetry magazine in April of 1957. It's just called Summer. It's by Philip Levine, and I want you to listen to, there's the speaker and there's the old man. And I want you to see if you can understand, because I'm not entirely clear myself about this, whether the old man that is spoken of is his old man, like his father, or another old man. And I know that those of you who grew up with me in Georgia and went to Clark Hill Lake, I want you to listen for the ways the lake is described, and I think you'll find it really familiar. Summer by Philip Levine. At Oxbow Beach, the August sun, a rake that ground the skull. Fouled in the mud and reeds, I dug oars for the center of the lake, whipping away the strangling spawn of weeds. I found a 10-foot hole and dove to where the squashed-in beer cans played with fire. The sun was hunting even here, heavy for air. I saw the trumpet yellow lily run between the junk and rocks too soft for hands, surfaced. The old man in the prow, awake. Beneath his parasol he growled commands and damned me and that hot and rotten lake. Toward dusk, out from the gray and falling dock, I cast without a hook, scribbling the scum that gelled above my line. As mute as rock, the sky was closing round the reel's thin scream. Behind the cottage, back and forth he swung, as back and forth I pushed the infant swing hung many years ago with his own care, from what was now an old and broken oak. Back and then forth. I thought the tree would tear, it moaned so loud that even he awoke. Later, beneath a bare electric light, we were contenders, circled by defeat, with beer and rummy quarreling toward the night. In order not to win, I had to cheat, and still I won, and it was he who paid. Fingering through the wallet stuffed and frayed with trust, to name and separate the bills and slap them on the table with a curse for all they cost. After the yellow pills, the red, then sleep, a more than patient nurse. And it was I who couldn't sleep, who heard the sound of something sucking up the lake, a human laugh that couldn't be a bird, but was, and had to see if I could wake him from his sleep, and did, and lost my head from fear of what he nuzzled toward in bed. I could have pushed the rowboat from the dock and pulled away and left him there awake. I stayed, though, not because I had some share in what I knew would come. Out on the lake, whatever had been stirring settled back and waited for the sun to fix its stare. And really, if you were going to say what this poem was about, it would be like a young man and an old man go fishing, and the old man's dying, and they quarrel and fight. But how much more elegantly said in that poem. So here is a murderous little poem by May Swenson, and it starts with murder and ends with murder. And the question I have for you in this poem is like, what kind of murder is this? What exact kind of murder is this? So May Swenson was born in 1913 and died in 1989. It's called Strawberrying. My hands are murder red. Many a plump head drops on the heap in the basket, or ripe to bursting they might be hearts, matching the blackbird's wing fleck. Gripped to a reed, he shrieks his cocoree in the next field. He's left his peck in some juicy cheeks. When at first blush and mostly white, they showed streaks of sweetness to the marauder. We're picking near the shore. The morning sunny, a slight wind moving rough-veined leaves, our hands rumple among. Fingers find by feel the ready fruit in clusters. Here and there their squishy wounds. Flesh was perfect yesterday. June was for gorging. Sweet hearts young and firm before decay. Take only the biggest and not too ripe, a mother calls to her girl and boy barefoot in the furrows. Don't step on any. Don't change rows. Don't eat too many. Mesmerized by the largesse, the children squat and pull and pick handfuls of rich scarlets, half for the baskets, half for avid mouths. Soon whole faces are stained. A crop this thick begs for plunder. Ripeness wants to be ravished. As udders of cows when hard, the blue-veined bags distended ache to be stripped. Hunkered in mud between the rows, sun burning the backs of our necks, we grope for and rip loose soft, nippled heads. If they bleed, too soft, let them stay. Let them rot in the heat. When, hidden away in a damp hollow under moldy leaves, I come upon a clump of heart shapes, once red, now spider-spit gray, intact but empty, still attached to their dead stems, families smothered as at Pompeii. I rise and stretch. I eat one more big, ripe, lopped head. Red-handed, I leave the field. So that's Strawberrying by May Swenson. So here's a poem by Mark Doty. Mark Doty is still alive as far as I know, or at least as far as Poetry Foundation knows, because I got this information from them. He was born in 1953, 4 years before I was. And he's walking his dog in the graveyard. So this is called Deep Lane, June 23rd, Evening of the First Fireflies, by Mark Doty. June 23rd, Evening of the First Fireflies. We're walking in the cemetery down the road, and I look up from my distracted study of whatever, an unfocused gaze somewhere a few feet in front of my shoes, and see that Ned has run on ahead with the champagne plume of his tail held especially high, his head erect, which is often a sign that he has something he believes he is not allowed to have. And in the gathering twilight, what is it that is gathering and who gathered and who is doing the harvesting? I can make out that the long horizontal between his lovely jaws is one of the 4 stakes planted on the slope to indicate where the backhoe will dig a new grave. Of course, my impulse is to run after him, to replace the marker out of respect for the rule that we won't desecrate the tombs. Or at least for those who knew this woman, whose name inks a placard in the rectangle claimed by the 4 poles of vanishing, 3 poles now, and how it's within their recollection, their gathering, she'll live. Evening of memory, spark lamps in the grass. I stand and watch him go in his wild figure 8s. I say, "You run, darling. You tear up that hill." So for me, this poem is a recognition of life's brief conquering, brief and temporary conquering over death, which will come in winter. So here's probably the most famous of the poems that I'm going to read today. It's called The Summer Day by Mary Oliver, who died in 2019. She was born in 1935. It's just called The Summer Day. Who made the world? Who made the swan and the black bear? Who made the grasshopper? This grasshopper, I mean. The one who has flung herself out of the grass, the one who is eating sugar out of my hand, the one who is moving her jaws back and forth instead of up and down, who is gazing around with her enormous and complicated eyes. Now she lifts her pale forearms and thoroughly washes her face. Now she snaps her wings open and floats away. I don't know exactly what a prayer is. I do know how to pay attention, how to fall down into the grass, how to kneel down in the grass, how to be idle and blessed, how to stroll through the fields, which is what I've been doing all day. Tell me, what else should I have done? Doesn't everything die at last, and too soon? Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? That is The Summer Day by Mary Oliver. I have a couple more poems to read you, and then I'm going to read you my poem that I've read on Storytime before. Sorry, I'm bringing it back again. It's the Fowler's Book of Plants, Uncle Bob poem, the second section of which is the summer section. But I happen to think it's a really good summer section, so I'm going to read the whole poem to you. Here's a poem called The Twilight of England, and I was originally only going to read you the summer part, but it's a complete poem by Deborah Gregor. And of course, she's speaking of England throughout this entire thing. And the island that she refers to here is in England itself. And the question I have for you in this poem is, what is the twilight of England that Deborah Gregor is referring to here? Is it when they were conquered by the Roman Empire? Was that the beginning of their twilight, which then went on to be the Dark Ages and the Middle Ages, et cetera, et cetera? Or is the twilight of England now? And we can discuss it later if you want. The Twilight of England by Deborah Gregor. Summer. Late in the day, late in the century, a swan, which was to say Her Majesty's by right, rolled onto its side midstream, capsized. It washed its wing whiter in the blackened water. The codling worm had curled in the apple's heart. The air grew rich on last year's leafy rot. If the plum was a planet, it was twilight on both sides. The light worn out, the sun refusing to set on the snail that conquered the window pane, trailing a slimy glitter. A boy laid his head down on his Latin. Tacitus, still saying of this island, one must remember we are dealing with barbarians, not yet softened by protracted peace. Tacitus, the emperor's son-in-law, destined for the colonial service, I do him a disservice who said a bath and a good meal were the enslavement-making vice as agreeable as it was to their conquerors. The peonies, the pale blood-flecked ones, laid down their heavy heads in the dirt. Time for the last prayer of the day. To rise from the church turned into a mosque, into the air whose acid etched the stone in a scabrous language no one spoke. Time for the Curry Queen to open its doors, the imperial boat to fry the first fish and chips, next door to the Moor's Head, where the first pint of bitters been drawn. Glittered by streetlight, like the new money minted, shrunken from the old, only Her Majesty's profile plumper, the sun coined as weak as the pound. In the butcher's window, pheasants hung, head down, shot last weekend on the Queen's winter estate. In the new dark ages, the darkened mills stood their sad ground, satanically cold. This was the ruin of Britain. The late prophet Gildas howled, who got his dates wrong, his history tearful, his sentence swollen with the splendors of complaint, who said, I need say no more, and drew breath midstream. Time for a rat to be elevated like the host in the claws of the risen tawny owl. For the wind to whine, unrepentant, through the ruined abbey. To wrap its winding sheet around the bones of the Knights Templar who survived their holy desert war only to be rowed through the pestilential mist to an island abloom with ague and damp, to lay themselves down forever, to be picked clean by the lowly, holy orders. And rereading that poem again, I think that the twilight of England is not either of the things that I said, but just one slow grind, which we're nearing the end of. But I would love to hear what you have to say at the end, if you would like to share. Here's another one before we read Fowler's Book of Plants called Summer by Heather Crystal. And it's Crystal, but it's spelled Christle if you want to find it. Just again called Summer. Today you find yourself guilty as the rim you split an egg against. You press charges, you spell out your name like the letters are medals for good conduct in a bad war. The night moves in with you into your room until even your sleep is not your own. Through the window, the grass tells you to give up. And you are trying. But on the other hand, things keep you. The moon, the cars. You undress yourself more deeply down, like this is the way to get to the future. You let the darkness medically examine you. So much can't be put back together. To burn the house down, to burn the house up, it's the same problem in any direction. Your matter. You turn on the light. A little bit of a mysterious poem there. Okay, and here is my poem called Fowler's Book of Plants, Uncle Bob. 1. There was never a time Uncle Bob was not red-nosed. He always said, "Call the concierge," for any problem. He wasn't a diplomat, but he seemed important like that. He had special cocktail tools, glasses shaped for special drinks, a multi-level shot glass. Important to know, it seemed, how much you actually drank. He was from a time when men kept their secrets, not that anyone now would care about the secrets such men kept. Not a diplomat, but like one, breathing an air refined with something, not as crass as money, something like fine perfume, Scotch whiskey, cigars, brandy, tweed, fedoras, flowing around and through him naturally, without any effort or needing any commentary. Everything imagined, assumed, obtained. A man keeps himself to himself. Uncle was never a man who knew how not to have. He'd had, or at least it seemed he'd had, all his life, at least a concierge. 2. The girls would come in the summer, splash in the lake, and gather the glacier stones from the lapping edge. Then leave for school in the fall, using the lake house as a cookie jar for things remembered. A broken arm, that orange swimsuit, sudden lightning, one summer friends, the smell of warm rain as it changed the stones from light to dark. Then later, drying off with big towels, listening to the pattering on the roof. Laughter and silence from all the years rolled up into one echo remembered like a single long. Then something in the body, a place on the dial between the soft mumble of adult voices, fresh linens, the smell of gin and tonic. One thing collected from everything that happened there. 3. And suddenly we are old, at least mature. But Uncle Bob got truly old. Oh, we had warning. But who knew that an era would tumble down with him? spilling the dust of rotary phones and old wallpaper onto our shiny personal devices. That era rolled away like a kickball down a tree-lined Michigan street, losing momentum as it went. Made of tire swings, lightning bugs, tornadoes, cashmere overcoats, town cars, martinis, and harvest gold appliances. And suddenly, the lake house was ours. The taxes on it, child's play for a diplomat like Uncle Bob, but a sharp-bladed boon for us. And so, we let it go. And we let go that one thing we had collected and held there, unnamed, because it is beyond language or anything thinkable. So the lake house belongs to strangers. Is it empty? Razed to the ground? Filled with summer laughter and children waking up slowly, happily, not knowing where they are? I'd rather not know. And that is my poem, Fowler's Book of Plants, Uncle Bob. And we're ready to read the short story. And I want you to suspend your disbelief because, like I said earlier, we now know what the interior of Venus is like and how unhospitable to life. I mean, absolutely unhospitable to life it is. But back in the time that Ray Bradbury wrote this, probably in the 40s or 50s, we didn't know. And so science fiction writers could just make it up. But the thing I've always loved about science fiction, and that my bestest and greatest English teacher hated about science fiction, she thought science fiction was escapist, that it wasn't about real things. But I believe that science fiction allows us the remove to talk about important things in a way that we can understand better because we're at a slight remove from it, because it's happening on another planet or it's happening with aliens or whatever, you know. And I don't know if you agree with me. See what you think after hearing this story. It's called All Summer in a Day by Ray Bradbury. Ready? Ready. Now? Soon. Do the scientists really know? Will it happen today? Will it? Look, see for yourself. The children pressed to each other like so many roses, so many weeds, intermixed, peering out for a look at the hidden sun. It rained. It had been raining for 7 years, thousands upon thousands of days compounded and filled from one end to the other with rain, with the drum and gush of water, with the sweet crystal fall of showers and the concussion of storms so heavy they were tidal waves come over the islands. 1,000 forests had been crushed under the rain and grown up 1,000 times to be crushed again. And this was the way life was forever on the planet Venus. And this was the schoolroom of the children of the rocket men and women who had come to a raining world to set up a civilization and live out their lives. It's stopping, it's stopping. Yes, yes. Margot stood apart from them, from these children who could never remember a time when there wasn't rain and rain and rain. They were all 9 years old, and if there had been a day 7 years ago when the sun came out for an hour and showed its face to the stunned world, they could not recall. Sometimes, at night, she heard them stir in remembrance, and she knew they were dreaming and remembering gold or a yellow crayon or a gold coin, enough to buy the world with. She knew they thought they remembered a warmness like a blushing in the face, in the body, in the arms and legs and trembling hands. But then they always awoke to the tatting drum, the endless shaking down of clear bead necklaces upon the roof, the walk, the gardens, the forests, and their dreams were gone. All day yesterday they had read in class about the sun and how it was, and how like a lemon it was, and how hot. And they had written small stories or essays or poems about it. I think the sun is a flower that blooms for just 1 hour. That was Margot's poem, read in a quiet voice in the still classroom while the rain was falling outside. "Aw, you didn't write that," protested one of the boys. "I did," said Margot. "I did." "William," said the teacher. But that was yesterday. Now the rain was slackening, and the children were crushed in the great thick windows. "Where's teacher?" "She'll be back." "She'd better hurry, we'll miss it." They turned on themselves like a feverish wheel, all tumbling spokes. Margot stood alone. She was a very frail girl who looked as if she had been lost in the rain for years, and the rain had washed out the blue from her eyes and the red from her mouth and the yellow from her hair. She was an old photograph, dusted from an album, whitened away, and if she spoke at all, her voice would be a ghost. Now she stood separate, staring at the rain and the loud, wet world beyond the huge glass. "What are you looking at?" said William. Margot said nothing. "Speak when you're spoken to." He gave her a shove, but she did not move. Rather, she let herself be moved only by him and nothing else. They edged away from her. They would not look at her. She felt them go away, and this was because she would play no games with them in the echoing tunnels of the underground city. If they tagged her and ran, she stood blinking after them and did not follow. When the class sang songs about happiness and life and games, her lips barely moved. Only when they sang about the sun and the summer did her lips move, and she watched the drenched windows. And then, of course, the biggest crime of all was that she had come here only 5 years ago from Earth. And she remembered the sun and the way the sun was and the sky was when she was 4 in Ohio. And they had been on Venus all their lives, and they had only been 2 years old when last the sun came out and had long since forgotten the color and heat of it and the way it really was. But Margot remembered. "It's like a penny," she once said, eyes closed. "No, it's not," the children cried. "It's like a fire," she said, "in the stove." "You're lying. You don't remember," cried the children. But she remembered, and stood quietly apart from all of them and watched the patterning windows. And once, a month ago, she had refused to shower in the school shower rooms, had clutched her hands to her ears and over her head, screaming the water mustn't touch her head. So after that, dimly she sensed it, she was different, and they knew her difference and kept away. There was talk that her father and mother were taking her back to Earth next year. It seemed vital to her that they do so, though it would mean the loss of thousands of dollars to her family. And so the children hated her for all these reasons of big and little consequence. They hated her pale snow face, her waiting silence, her thinness, and her possible future. "Get away!" The boy gave her another push. "What are you waiting for?" Then for the first time she turned and looked at him, and what she was waiting for in her eyes. "Well, don't wait around here," cried the boy savagely. "You won't see nothing." Her lips moved. "Nothing," he cried. "It was all a joke, wasn't it?" He turned to the other children. "Nothing's happening today, is it?" They all blinked at him and then, understanding, laughed and shook their heads. Nothing, nothing. Oh, but, Margot whispered, her eyes helpless. But this is the day. The scientists predict. They say they know the sun. All a joke, said the boy, and seized her roughly. Hey, everyone, let's put her in the closet before the teacher comes. No, said Margot, falling back. They surged about her, caught her up, and bore her, protesting, and then pleading, and then crying. Back into a tunnel, a room, a closet, where they slammed and locked the door. They stood looking at the door and saw it tremble from her beating and throwing herself against it. They heard her muffled cries. Then, smiling, they turned and went out back down the tunnel just as the teacher arrived. Ready, children? She glanced at her watch. Yes, said everyone. Are we all here? Yes. The rain slacked still more. They crowded to the huge door. The rain stopped. It was as if in the midst of a film concerning an avalanche, a tornado, a hurricane, a volcanic eruption, something had first gone wrong with the sound apparatus, thus muffling and finally cutting off all noise, all of the blasts and repercussions and thunders, and then second, ripped the film from the projector and inserted in its place a beautiful tropical slide which did not move or tremor. The world ground to a standstill. The silence was so immense and unbelievable that you felt your ears had been stuffed or you had lost your hearing altogether. The children put their hands to their ears. They stood apart. The door slid back. And the smell of the silent, waiting world came into them. The sun came out. It was the color of flaming bronze, and it was very large. And the sky around it was a blazing blue tile color, and the jungle burned with sunlight as the children, released from their spell, rushed out, yelling into the springtime. Now don't go too far, called the teacher after them. You've only got 2 hours, you know. You wouldn't want to get caught out. But they were running and turning their faces to the sky and feeling the sun on their cheeks like a warm iron. They were taking off their jackets and letting the sun burn their arms. Oh, it's better than the sun lamps, isn't it? Oh, much, much better. They stopped running and stood in the great jungle that covered Venus, that grew and never stopped growing, tumultuously even as you watched it. It was a nest of octopi clustering up great arms of flesh-like weed, wavering, flowering in this brief spring. It was the color of rubber and ash, this jungle from the many years without the sun. It was the color of stones and white cheeses and ink. It was the color of the moon. The children lay out laughing on the jungle mattress and heard it sigh and squeak under them, resilient and alive. They ran among the trees. They slipped and fell. They pushed each other. They played hide and seek and tag, but most of all they squinted at the sun until the tears ran down their faces. They put their hands up to that yellowness and that amazing blueness, and they breathed out of the fresh, fresh air and listened to the silence which suspended them in a blessed sea of no sound and no motion. They looked at everything and savored everything. Then, wildly, Like animals escaping from their caves, they ran and ran in shouting circles. They ran for an hour and did not stop running. And then in the midst of their running, one of the girls wailed. Everyone stopped. The girl, standing in the open, held out her hand. "Oh, look, look," she said, trembling. They came slowly to look at her opened palm. In the center of it, cupped and huge, was a single raindrop. She began to cry, looking at it. They glanced quietly at the sun. "Oh, oh," a few cold drops fell on their noses and their cheeks and their mouths. The sun faded behind a stir of mist. A wind blew cold around them. They turned and started to walk back toward the underground house, their hands at their sides, their smiles vanishing away. A boom of thunder startled them, and like leaves before a new hurricane, they tumbled upon each other and ran. Lightning struck 10 miles away, 5 miles away, a mile, a half mile. The sky darkened into midnight in a flash. They stood in the doorway of the underground for a moment until it was raining hard. Then they closed the door and heard the gigantic sound of the rain falling in tons and avalanches everywhere and forever. Will it be 7 more years? Yes, 7. Then one of them gave a little cry. "Margot!" "What?" "She's still in the closet where we locked her. Margot!" They stood as if someone had driven them like so many stakes into the ground, into the floor. They looked at each other and then looked away. They glanced out at the world that was now raining and raining and raining steadily. They could not meet each other's glances. Their faces were solemn and pale. They looked at their hands and feet, their faces down. "Margot," one of the girls said. "Well?" No one moved. "Go on," whispered the girl. They walked slowly down the hall in the sound of cold rain. They turned through the doorway to the room in the sound of the storm and thunder, lightning on their faces, blue and terrible. They walked over to the closet door slowly and stood by it. Behind the closet door was only silence. They unlocked the door even more slowly and let Margot out. And that is All Summer in a Day by Ray Bradbury. One of the things that we didn't read today was a very long poem by Ronald Johnson. We don't have time to read it now, but I'm going to read it before the summer's over. Those of you who've been coming to Storytime for a while will recognize this one because it begins with a scientific writing that reads like poetry from Gilbert White that opens it up. And then the poem, which is even more like a poem, follows that. So I want to just acknowledge that the summer poems were not all light and fluffy. They were poems that dealt with big themes like death and sadness and despair. And I think especially during this time where it is after the midsummer, when, like June 21st is the longest day and the shortest night, and it sort of tends to fool us a little bit because the day moves in a certain direction, so it's like it moves to where we still have very late nights, but the sun rises a little bit later. And right around August 1st, it is going to be the time when we actually can sort of detect that the days are getting shorter. The first harvest festival on August 1st. Traditionally, the first harvest festival, the halfway point between the summer solstice and the autumnal equinox. And while that is the end of the prepared material for Storytime, it is not the end of Storytime, because I'm curious what has come up for you in reading those poems, or if you have any answers that you want to share about what was going on. So I'm going to turn off the spotlight on me so I can see everyone else and just see who has anything to share. You can take yourself off mute if you want to share something. Hi, Kat. Oh, and P.S. for the people that are here in Santa Cruz, I do Storytime Live every Saturday, but especially Maureen, you'll be excited about this if you haven't read your thing. I'm doing Storytime Live and in person in Davenport on July 25th, which is like, all you have to do is toddle next door, which will be great. Very excited. Oh, you know what? I'm gonna turn the sound up, and that means that I'm gonna hear myself being weirdly echoed, but that's okay.
Is that Ed's show?
That's Ed's doing Dune Art from 10 to 5 on both days, and then at 5 o'clock on Saturday we're going to do story time, and we'll have food, like probably barbecue chicken or something like that. So it'll be at the Davenport house. Yeah. I'm super happy about it. And I want to thank you, Drew and Rita, for even showing up when I'm doing a test on Substack. You're dedicated. I love that. And there's Margaret Goldfarb. Hi.
Hey. Yeah, I just wanted to just kind of tell everybody as I had texted you that Mary Oliver, there is a documentary that got a really great review on NPR. It is, when I looked it up, it is on NPR or PBS on their streaming site. It is also on Apple TV and supposedly in Laemmle theaters around here in LA. So not sure, and it's supposedly a wonderful documentary is what they were saying.
Yeah.
So I just wanted, since you read her today, I wanted to just provide that to everybody.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. I hadn't read your follow-up email message from that, so thanks for sharing that. And also, I believe this is true, but there is a couple of British murder mysteries that I like to watch, and you can actually sign up and be a contributor to KQED, which is a local PBS radio station. Television station, words. And if you do that, then you get access to every show that is on KQED, and you get access to it to stream. And the series that I'm wanting to watch is called Murder in the Mountains, and it's from Walter Presents. So, and it's $8 to $10 a month to sign up for KQED. Maureen?
I
was going to say streaming it, and both Claudia and I do this. We have Passport, which
Mm-hmm.
is the streaming, and it's $5 a month.
Oh,
So, that's worth knowing about. And I watch I'll wait for a series that I really like, and then I'll binge the whole thing in 2 days because you get to see it right away. It's so great.
and Passport is for PBS stuff.
Yeah, PBS. It's just,
Okay.
KQED comes up on your, your screen on your whatever device you're using, and then you've already signed in as, they have your information, so they know that you have your passport enabled, and then you can watch them all. Sure.
That's cool. That's cheaper. I like it.
Yeah.
And they're,
Because I was going to pay like a bunch of money, and she said, no, it's just do $5 a month.
yeah,
Fine.
that's great. So Brian Miller just posted the Mary Oliver documentary in the chat. So if anyone's curious about it, you can copy that from the chat before we're done. I want to say hi to, of course, hi to my Georgia crew and the Santa Cruz crew, but also the Seattle crew is well represented. Del Rey, I know, was here earlier, and Joe and Nova were here. Well, Nova just left, I think. Oh, no, there you are. Woohoo! No, so what happens is that when you turn your camera on, it moves your position, so it's like you were elsewise someplace else. And also Rand from the LA crew is here too, so thank you. And Marie, who's out in the heat right now. Thanks for being here. And Nancy and Alan and Lynn from Santa Cruz, along with Maureen. And I hope that all you Santa Cruz folks can come to the live in-person story time. That will be really cool.
You forgot me. I'm in Santa Cruz.
Oh, yay! Hi, Larry. I
Would you repeat the day and time for that? For those of us who are.
Yeah. So Storytime live and in person in Davenport is at 5 on Saturday, and then from 10 to 5 on that day you can come in and see Ed's work. And you can just come late in the day and kind of look at the work and maybe buy some or not, and then have some barbecue and yeah.
What date is it?
Oh, it's the July 25th.
Okay, before my birthday.
Before your birthday, yes.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else about what we read tonight? Did you like those summer poems? Just, thumbs up if you're on camera, or you can thumbs up me in the chat. All right. All right. We will do more of that. More summer poems. And that's a wild story.
Sage, isn't Dandelion Wine a little bit about summertime?
Yes. Oh yeah. Maybe we'll just have a little Ray Bradbury fest, because he's such a good writer.
I love that. To me, it was one of the first books that I read that it was like my senses. I mean, the screen door closing, everything, the grass, I could just smell and be in summer. I was there. All my senses were there. It's the first time I really. And that was Dandelion Wine by Ray Bradbury. It was just amazing to me. So, anyway,
And it's a short story, not a novel, right?
It's a novel, but it's not. It's a novel.
Yeah. Well, maybe we'll just spend a few storytime sessions in the summer reading it. Why not? Thanks. That's a great suggestion. I'm going to write it down because my brain won't perhaps remember it if I don't. Oh, and of course, I have to have a pen that works. There we go. All right. That will do it. That will do us for story time for Saturday, June 11th. thanks so much for coming. I love you all, and we'll talk soon.
Talk soon.
Okay, bye for now.
Bye.
Recording stopped.